Now, securing Next.js pages is tricky, considering all of the layers of rendering that Next.js has to offer. Now you see, you have to understand where dynamic rendering starts and stops, and where client-only code takes over. But regardless of your strategy, the common and most recommended way to secure Next.js pages is to secure them on the server. That means you have to employ cookies instead of local storage. And that also means that you have to validate JWTs in the same file that your client code lives in. Now, with all of these possibilities, it becomes really hard to make decisions on where things go. So the goal of this video is to show you how to handle things like sign in, sign up, password reset, and email confirmation for a Next.js app using the best practices, and also show you how to secure the pages on the server instead of doing that on the client. My name is Christian Wamba, and I'm a developer advocate for AWS Amplify. Feel free to reach out to me in the comments regarding this video, and I'd be happy to help. That said, let's jump in and create an app. Now, before we get started, we need to create an Amplify app. Amplify will provide all of the auth features that we need for this project. That said, head to AWS console and search for AWS Amplify. Open it, then click the new app drop-down and select build an app. Give the app a name and click confirm deployment. This will take a minute to deploy, but once it's done, click the Launch Studio button to open Amplify Studio, where you can set up and manage your data and users. Now that you have an Amplify app, we can set up authentication for this app, which kind of sets us up for creating user accounts. To do that, click the authentication menu from the sidebar, but leave email as the login option. Scroll to the configure sign up section, and you should see the add attribute drop-down. Click the drop-down icon and select the name attribute. You can optionally make the password weak for testing, but don't forget to make it strong before moving to production. Now go ahead and click the deploy button, then confirm deployment to deploy the auth service. You have to give Amplify a few minutes to create and deploy an AWS Authenticator service. Now click done once the deployment finishes. Now the next step is to connect our Amplify backend app with a front-end app. Now in this case, of course, it's going to be Next.js, but we won't be creating one from scratch. I've already created a Next.js starter project that includes the necessary dependencies and UI components for the various pages in our app. All you just need to do is change to your preferred directory and run this digit command to clone the starter project. Now cd into the new project directory and open the project in your code editor. As you can see, we already have the starter files containing the UI components already set up for various pages in the auth directory. These components are the basis for our authentication interface, and as we progress, we'll explain the contents of this file and update their content as needed. That said, run npm install to install the dependencies. And also, before we start the app locally, we also need to install the Amplify client library, which we use to communicate the authentication API. Now with all the setup out of the way, run npm run dev to start up the dev server. If you jump back to the browser, you can see we have a landing page and a dashboard page. The goal of this video is to secure this dashboard, and to do that, we have a sign up page for creating new users, a sign in page for authenticating them, a confirm email for verifying a new user's email address, a forgot password page so users that have forgotten or users that have accounts and have forgotten their passwords can reset it. Then finally, a change password page to actually reset this password. Alright, so we have our API all set up, but we can't talk to this API until we configure it. And to configure it, we need to pull its credentials down to this project. To do that, head back to Amplify Studio and click the deployment successful link. Copy the pull command and run it at the root of the Next.js project. Now to run this command, you need to install Amplify CLI. If you don't have it installed, I will leave a link to a 5-minute article on how to set up Amplify CLI. Now, after you've run the command, the Amplify CLI will open a browser and ask you to authorize it to have access to the Amplify app you've created. Give it access and close the tab. Now return to the CLI, and here you need to answer a few prompt questions to help Amplify understand your project. Now choose all the default answers except for the source directory and the output folder, which you need to set to the root folder and the .next folder respectively. Now let's jump back to the code editor to see what the command has done. Now the CLI adds an Amplify folder which contains your backend info and an AWS exports file to your project. For now, we are interested in the AWS exports file, which is like a .env file that contains the credentials you can use to configure the Amplify client library. Now, before we use the APIs in the Amplify library, we need to configure Amplify in the auth module layout component. This will allow the library to communicate with the cloud services that we've set up with Amplify. This way, we can easily access the methods for signing in, signing up, and managing user sessions in any page or component that is wrapped by the layout component. Now, to configure the library, open the layout.js file in the auth folder and import the Amplify library. You also need to import the credentials file and then call the configure function from the Amplify library to configure the library with the credentials. Now, to store the user access token as a cookie, instead of storing it in the local storage, we set SSR to true. Storing the token as a cookie makes it easy for server rendered pages to access the token. Now, at this point, we've set up Amplify, set up the Next app, and we've gone ahead to configure our Amplify app in the Next app. And the next step would be to actually start writing some authentication code. I feel like I just said a lot of next in that last sentence. Okay, now it makes sense to start with sign up because we need to create a user before we can actually authenticate them. So that said, open the sign up page file in the auth folder and import the auth object. We're going to redirect when the user successfully signs up, so let's import the use router hook from Next. Now the starter code already has a state to track the user data from the form. It stores the name, the email, and the password values. And the next step is to actually write a handler function that would take all the data from the form and submit it to Amplify. So that said, start with creating a router since we are going to use it to redirect the user if the signup was successful. Then go into the async signup function body and create a try-catch block to handle any errors that might occur when we're trying to sign up. Now call the auth.signup function, which will send the user details to Amplify to create a new user. Add the name field as an additional attribute and set auto sign in to true. This will ensure that the user will not need to sign in after they've verified. Now, after the signup is completed, we want to redirect the user to the confirm signup page where they will enter their verification code. The return statement renders a form which has an onSubmit handler that calls the signup function. The form has the input fields with onChange handlers for capturing and storing the values in the user state object. Now jump back to the browser and fill in your details. This will create an account and store the details in the user pool. To see the details of the newly created account, go to your Apps Amplify Studio dashboard and click User Management from the sidebar. You should see the user you've just created in the users table. Now, after you've successfully signed up, AWS Amplify will automatically send a verification code to your email address to verify your email. Open your email inbox and you should find a message from your app with your verification code. Now, we need to actually write the code that makes this email confirmation page work. To do that, open the confirm email page file in the auth folder and import the auth object. You also need to import use search params, which will be used to access query parameters. Now, after the user is successfully authenticated, we want to redirect them to their dashboard page. So let's import the use router hook as well. The starter code already has a state to track the user data from the form. Currently, it's just tracking the verification code the user enters in the form. Now we need to initialize the router and the search params object. And then in the handler function, we want to call the get method on the search params object to get the user's email from the URL and assign it to a constant named email. Next, use a try-catch block to handle errors that might occur and then call auth.confirm signup function, passing it the email and the verification code the user entered. These details will be sent to Amplify for verification. If the verification is successful, we want to redirect the user to their dashboard page, but if an error occurs, we want to just log the error to the console. Now the return statement renders a form which has an onSubmit handler that calls the confirm function. All of this out of the way, head over to your browser and enter the confirmation code that was sent to your email after signing up, and you should be redirected to your dashboard page. Now, if you navigate to your application's Amplify Studio dashboard, under User Management, you should see that the user status has changed to confirmed. Now, what we need to do next is to enable users to log out of the app when they want to. And to achieve this, we need to create a component that renders a sign out button. When the sign out button is clicked, the user will be logged out of the app. Create a folder named component at the root of your project, and inside that folder, create a file named signoutbutton.js. At the top of the file, add the use client directive to tell Next.js that this is a client library component. Import the auth object and the use router hook. And the next step is to actually define the component that will render the sign out button. So define a component called sign out button, and inside it create a router object. Now render the button and add an onClick event to it. Use a try-catch block to handle any errors that might occur, and then call the signout or the auth.signout function to sign the user out of the application. Now immediately the user is signed out, we need to redirect them back to the sign-in page where they can sign back in if they want to. Now we'll create the sign-in page in a second, but first, let's add the button component to the dashboard. Render the sign out button component before the main element closing tag. And don't forget to import it at the top of the project. Now this dashboard component returns a JSX that defines what authenticated users will see when they are signed in. This is why we are rendering the sign out button in here. If you head over to the browser now and click the sign out button, first of all you'll be signed out, but on the other hand you'll be redirected to the sign in page. Now let's go ahead and actually implement signing in. Now we've set up the functionality for signing up and signing out. Now we need to add the functionality for authenticating users who have signed up, allowing them to redirect to the dashboard after a successful authentication. To do this, open the sign-in page in the auth folder and import the auth object. After successfully signing in, we need to redirect the user to their dashboard, so let's import the use router hook from Next. The starter code has a state to track the user login data. We just need to create a router object to handle the navigation. In the handler function, add a try-catch block to handle any errors that might occur. Then call the auth.signin function, which will send the user's details to Amplify for authentication. Now if the sign-in is successful, we want to redirect the user to their dashboard. Otherwise, we log any errors that occurs to the console. Next, we need to hook the function up to the form. The return statement renders a form which has an onSubmit handler that calls the sign-in function. The form has input fields for just the email and the password, and the values are tracked in the state. Now head back to the browser and enter the login credentials. You should be automatically redirected to the dashboard. If you look at the application tab in the dev tool, you will see that the access token has been stored as a cookie. Now currently, anyone can access the dashboard page regardless of whether they are authenticated or not. we need to intercept unauthenticated users attempting to access the dashboard and redirect them to the sign-in page instead. And to do this, we need to configure Amplify again at the root layout. Now, since this particular layout, unlike the auth layout, is server-side rendered, the Amplify library won't be accessible to client-only components, which explains why we also configured Amplify at the auth level. Now, open the layout page file in the app folder and import the Amplify library. You need to import the credentials file and then call the configure method from Amplify library to configure the library with the credentials. Setting the SSR property to true allows Amplify to access the user's access token from the cookie when Next.js renders on the server. Now, the next thing we need to do is to update our dashboard page to render the dashboard only for authenticated users and redirect unauthenticated users to the sign-in page. That said, open the dashboard page file in auth folder and import headers from Next.js. You should also import with SSR context from AWS Amplify. Finally, import the redirect function from next/navigation for redirection. To check whether a user is authenticated on the server, create a request object with a header that contains the cookie. One of the cookie content, of course, is the user access token that can be used to identify the user. Pass the request object to the with SSR context function, which returns an instance of Amplify that is server-side friendly. Now we can use a try-catch block to handle any errors that might occur and then call the auth.currentAuthenticated_user function from the SSR instance to fetch the signed-in user's details. Since this function returns a promise, we need to update the dashboard function to an async function. Now, if the user is authenticated, we expect the function to return the user's data, which will render on the dashboard. Otherwise, we want to redirect the user to the sign-in page. Now you can head over to the browser, log out of the account, and you should see that the access token disappears from the cookie in the dev tool. If you try to access the dashboard again, you'll be redirected to the sign-in page. Now we need to take care of one more thing before we call it a day. We need to implement the forgot password feature and flow. This process is simple. When a user requests a password reset, they need to provide their email address. If Amplify finds the email address, it will send them verification code to that email. Open the forgot password page in the auth folder and import the auth object as usual. Also import the use router hook from Next. The starter code has an email state to track the phone values, but we need to create a router for redirecting the user after they've been sent an email. In the handler function, add a try-catch block to handle any errors that might occur, and then call the auth.forgotPassword method and pass it the email provided by the user. If the request is successful, we want to redirect the user to a change password page with their email as a query parameter. Now, if you go back to the sign-in page and click the forgot password link, you should be redirected to the password reset page. Now, enter your email address and an authentication code will be sent to your email. You'll also be redirected to the change password page. Open your inbox to find and copy the verification code for the final step. Alright, so finally we need to implement the functionality for the change password page so that once the user enters the code sent to their email alongside a password, they should be able to successfully log in with their new credentials. Now to implement this feature, open the change password page in the auth folder and import the auth object. You also need to import the use router and use search params hooks from Next.js. As usual, the starter code has a password state to track the code and the password fields from the form. But we need to initialize the router and the search params object. Then in the handler function, grab the email from the URL and call the forgot password submit from Amplify auth with it. The function also needs the code that you received and the new password. If the password change is successful, we want to redirect the user to the sign-in page. And if an error occurs, we want it logged to the console. Now head back to the browser and enter the code that was sent to your email with the new password and submit the form to change your password. Now there you have it. We've just made your Next.js dashboard page secure using AWS Amplify. And before I leave you, I want to make sure you don't waste any resources on this demo. Head back to your terminal and run amplify delete, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.